Hello, everyone, to another webinar of Gable. Let me quickly share my screen while people are trickling in. Excellent. So, hello, everyone. I'm really excited for this webinar today. Today, we're going to talk about how to incorporate flexibility into your workplace strategy. And before we do that and dive right in, let's get to know each other. If you can, please write your name and your role, where you're dialing in from, in the chat would be great. And so we'll have a meaningful discussion and get to know each other. Excellent. So just a little bit about Gable for those of you who don't know who we are. We are the operating system for the flexible workplace. We have 4 key pillars of our platform. The first is access to thousands of co-working spaces on demand, which are available globally. In addition, we have HQ management, which includes desk reservation, meeting room booking, and all the data insights that come with it, visitor management, and finally, event orchestration to help you organize events in your offices or in offsite. So let's dive right in and let's introduce our speakers. Please, each of you introduce your name, your role, and of course, a little bit about your policy. Henrik, let's start with you.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Henrik Järleskog. I am working for Sodexo. I am actually celebrating 20 years in the workplace industry this year. So I've been in different roles, different companies, CBRE 7 years and Ernst & Young for 7 and now 7 almost for Sodexo. The last 4 years, I've been the head of strategy for Europe, trying to figure out how all of the companies of this world are strategizing when it comes to workplace. Sodexo, for the people who don't know it, is the world's 19th largest organization with 435,000 employees. So I'm not working with future work internally. I'm working for all of the clients. So I have a unique vantage point, I think. When it comes to policy, most of our countries do fully flexible work, some of them hybrid.
Amazing. Thank you. Lisha?
Yes. Hello. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lisha. I am the Senior Manager of Workplace here at Handshake. I oversee all our global offices and our remote culture program, everything from how are we bringing in those remote culture to the real estate leases, contracts to our food program. So as we all know, like a little bit of everything falls under our purview. I've been doing these types of roles kind of like Henrik for like about 20 years. I think I'm really proud of them. I feel like we're kind of the center with our like Spider-Man webs out connecting everything. Currently at Handshake, we launched a hybrid policy. So if you are within 50 miles of an office, we do ask that you come in 3 days a week. The times that you come in on those days can be flexible based on personal needs. And then we have the other half of our employees are remote. So it's pretty evenly divided, half and half remote and in office. Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. Brent.
Hi, I'm Brent Arnold, and I'm glad I'm doing this today. This really made me realize that my LinkedIn photo is very old. So that is what I used to look like. Here's what I look like now. I appreciate that. But yeah, I'm Brent Arnold. I lead workplace innovation at Indeed. So I really began my career in architecture and interior design. So I spent about a decade doing that, creating spaces that I felt were functional, but also hopefully brought joy to the people that use it. So a few years ago, I transitioned over to the end user side, working at Indeed. Indeed was actually one of my clients that I worked on from the architecture industry. And so I designed quite a few of those spaces. But really what I focus on now is conducting experiments and really analyzing that data to help really optimize our global real estate, bring in new innovative things that really help people connect, collaborate effectively, really no matter where they are. We have over 11,000 employees globally. We have a mix of some employees that are fully remote. Probably about 2/3 or so, don't hold me to that number, are fully remote. And then we have also about a third of our employees that are scheduled hybrid employees. And so those employees are required to be in the office 2 days a week for the same 2 days a week. with the intent of being able to bring collaboration to those employees that are in the office at the same time. For those that are fully remote, it's just that. They can do what they want at most times. Sometimes those teams do have gatherings to bring people in at the same time for kickoffs, etc. But they usually have a lot more autonomy of when they come into the space. But really, I like to drive innovation. I like to try new things. I like to experiment with those. And really, I like to make sure that we not only set ourselves up for success now, but really what that success looks like in the future.
Incredible, and I like the fact that you moved from the other side, so you can see a lot, and I think that's part of creating innovation. It's quite amazing. So I'm really excited for the discussion piece, and there is a lot to cover, I would say. Excellent. So let's start with Henrik. So you mentioned that basically, you have a really unique vantage point in the sense of you see a lot of what others are doing, thousands of others company. Can you share a little bit about, how companies are incorporating flexibility into their workplaces and what data they have in terms of, obstacles, or data you have, sorry, in terms of obstacles, and how do you advise them to resolve them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as you say, I think I'm one of the first actually having this head of future work role that is externally oriented. So what I'm doing is that I'm giving our clients advice. Sometimes I'm sitting on their leadership teams, solving gridlocks, coming with data, reports, trends, really trying to drive and I would say move their strategy forward. And for example, I'm utilizing a lot of Flex Index data that probably most people know about in this call, which I think is one of the world's best data sources, of course. But there are also combinations of it. And most of the clients that I work with are the Fortune 500 companies in Europe and globally. And I would say it's pretty mind-blowing, right, that Henry O'Loughlin dropped the analysis last week where he done all the analysis of the Fortune 500 by work model, right? 4% are full-time in office, 86 are hybrid, and 10% are fully flexible. That's kind of mind-blowing data, right? That's not really what we see in the newspapers or what we read on the internet. But they all have their unique challenges, of course. There isn't a blueprint. What I see, for example, in the full-time in office companies is that they have big problems in recruiting because most people that they are looking for, they want to have flexibility. They also have a big job in really updating their offices and increasing their investments in the workplace experience to make that place really count and compete with other places, because otherwise they will be difficult to get people in. The hybrid companies, they have their challenges with the workplaces turning into call centers, right? People sit 9 to 5 in the office in digital meetings because they're forced to, not because they wanted to. Huge space, not utilized the office space that they are currently right-sizing, shrinking the space. One of the difficulties for the hybrid companies. And for the fully flexible companies, they are figuring out that they really need to meet more often. So some of them are really investing in external events or internal events, one-day events, or even in fantastic offices as well. So I think they all have unique challenges per model, but some of the challenges are common all over, I would say, the scale.
That's incredible. And you already mentioned a few. We hear this all the time. For companies that are hybrid, there is the focus on right-sizing your portfolio and understanding what's, in a hybrid model, what's the policy. Like, for example, Lisha mentioned, they have a concrete policy, some do not, right? Companies are fully flexible, are still leaning into how do we bring people together and where do we bring them together? What's the purpose of it, right? So there is programs and there is a rise around events and how to bring people together in a programmed manner. So it's very interesting and I think a bit reassuring in a sense that you see it across so many companies. And we oftentimes think, okay, this is my own personal challenge, my own company's challenge, but this is very common. This is your point.
Yeah, exactly. And like Lisha said, most companies are really early, big transformation journey that we are, just entering, I think. And it's easy to get distracted by all of this debate around how many days a week people should be here and there and where. But it's actually a distraction, I think, because the biggest movements are that companies are actually doing more with less people, and distributed work is here to stay. That happens in the background, and everything else is just a distraction.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lisha, over to you. You mentioned at the beginning your passion for this, and basically we're reinventing workplace. And I wanted, if you can share a little bit about Handshake survey insight and analytics around, what does the story and the data tell us about the importance of flexibility, and how did you implement that into your strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Liza. I think, kind of like Henrik said, like there's a lot of noise in the background, and I think we see a lot of companies trying this and doing it the wrong way and having to backpedal. And I think, like I was saying, like the future of work really is this like hybrid, flexible place. And like we are kind of still in that transition. I think what we need to remind leaders of companies is that, coming out of COVID, like for 4 years, we told people stay 6 feet away, wear a mask, staying home was the right thing to do. So now we have to like figure out what it means to bring people back together. Like we're transitioned. We're never going to be in that pre-COVID place. So I think the faster that companies can kind of catch up to that and understand and listen to what their people are asking for, the more successful they're going to be. Employees will tell you, and that's where for us, we lean on a lot of our surveys. And so we've been doing surveys around flexibility, what people need to be flexible. That varies by team. Different teams need different things. And I think it's really important to give those team leaders autonomy to build their team in the way that works for them. And when they come into the office, being really intentional about how they use that time. Like, again, like Henrik said, it's like a call center, right? We don't need people to just sit there with headphones for 8 hours a day. Like that's history. So like, what does it look like when we bring people together? What are they asking for? What are those needs? What do the offices look like? For me, it's really interesting to see when people come in, like what time of day, like when are people coming in? When are they leaving? What parts of the office are they utilizing more? And I think really trying to capitalize on some of those things, I think is really important. And then, like I said, surveys, like, so we landed on the 3-day-a-week kind of hybrid model. But the time of that can be flexible. And I think that's what's really important, right? Is like, do you have commute? Do you have to drop your kids off at school? Do you have to pick your kids up? You have a doctor appointment today. But I really think, like we've all said, like this really is a transition period. And like, as we continue to move forward, I think we are in this movement that is really special. And in 20 years, we're going to look back and be really proud of like the work we did and that we kind of had our fingerprints on this. So it's really exciting.
Amazing. And I think this actually leads in a really smooth way to Brent in terms of what you're doing, the workplace innovation, because it is innovation. If you can share a little bit about how did you took flexibility to the next level in Indeed in terms of how you tailor this to each team, the experiments that you've done in general. I think we're all part of a very large experiment in that sense, with different workplace arrangement, what worked, what didn't, and how these work arrangements supported collaboration and productivity. And I think most importantly, what are the outcomes that you've seen from all of these iterations?
Yeah, thanks. I really like the way that you phrase that we're all in this big experiment. I think one of the things that COVID has done is it's accelerated us to always be thinking in an experimental stage, or we should always be thinking in an experimental stage, and continuing to progress. Prior to that, it's kind of a par for course sort of things. Indeed was one of the companies that had Indeed like real estate standards that were very strict. We were actually working to build those as we were a growing company, but a lot of end users that I worked with had these standards, which still might serve a purpose, but there is an evolution to that and not something that needs to be as regimented. But to kind of talk about a little bit of some of the experiments that we've done, to reiterate, So most employees at Indeed are some form of hybrid or remote. We have like less than 1% of employees that are required to be in office in a facilities capacity. So when we think about what these spaces need to be, they need to really support a lot of different modals of working. So they could be collaboration, they could be focus, but overall, we really need to focus on flexibility and what works best for that individual end user using that space. A remote versus hybrid employee is going to need something different. A sales employee versus an engineer is going to need something different. And even if we start to go down to smaller groups, someone on the same team is going to need something different, as well as what one person may need for 1 hour of the day might be different than what they need for the next hour of the day. So looking at ways that we can always support that. Leisha, you made a comment around using surveys to get a lot of your input. We do the same thing. Also with that, we focus on surveys, we focus on focus groups as well, trying to get better with AI analytics for focus groups so we can try to get a larger population. We seem to get a lot of deeper information when we do that. So we're focusing a bit more on that. But really today, I'm going to talk about a couple experiments that are focused around some of our hybrid employees that do have a required in-office mandate. So they are the ones that have 2-day in-office mandate. But one of the things that we started to see with these employees is they often worked with the same clients of ours, the same Indeed clients. These two groups worked adjacently, but they weren't part of the same org. And what was really strange is like there were tensions amongst these employees sometimes, and there were also they wouldn't be meeting with the clients together. They would be in the same office building together, and they're not looking like we're a cohesive company. And so one of the small experiments that we did for this specific office in New York, so this was a 5-story office, so people were sat on adjacent floors. We learned very quickly that if you're stacked vertically, it means you're in basically another world from each other. And you don't really think about that you have that same person in the same building. So we really took a pretty like simple approach of setting at how these employees were sitting across the floor, of trying to integrate them a little bit more closely to how their project teams worked, even though they were on separate orgs, to see if that helped out with some of these like tensions that could be built and how they meet with clients. And we did learn from them that overall, we did see an improvement of the happiness that brought I'll bring up a couple of the issues that we might have had with that, but overall saw some improvement in that, and also being able to meet with employees or clients together also really showed that cohesion from the team. One of the things we really took away from that is people are afraid of change. Even moving a desk can feel daunting. And so having a good change management program in effect for any kind of flexibility is extremely important. It's a different way for people to think. Really looking at the differences between different groups is also important. Some of the groups were known to be noisier, some were known to be quieter, and making sure that we solve for those issues with how we were also sitting people. Real quick, I'm going to go through another experiment too that was pretty similar to that, but it was a little bit different. So in Dublin, which is our EMEA headquarters, we also did an experiment of sitting groups together, but this time we really pressure tested it. We sat teams together in the same neighborhood. They were basically surrounded by 3 walls and had everything they needed to work in that area. They had conference rooms, they had focus spaces, they had any kind of areas that they needed, collaboration areas as well in there. And we sat these teams that worked adjacent together, really next to each other. And we're like, okay, cool. Now you guys fight it out, see how it goes. We really learned that they liked it. And what wasn't normally our seating policy really worked out on there. So generally we found that like there was faster collaboration. We heard from our employees. There was an enhanced feeling of connection across teams. And what worked nicely is we had some employees that were onboarded during that time, and it really helped for that bonding during that onboarding. So having that in-person connection really helped out on that, as well as having connection to others that they kind of work adjacently with. And so a few things from that is we did get information from sensors also with how people are using the space, but really our most valuable feedback for this particular experiment was getting that qualitative feedback from individual employees. It's important that we balance what that collaboration looks like with success, with also how people are going to be focusing and working with each other. And for us to continue to refine our designs based on what is needed at that specific time. How work works today is probably not how work is going to work next year. and always being able to be flexible and nimble and being able to have spaces and policies in place to be able to support what that future might look like.
Wow, so many things I have questions on, but I think that too several things that stood out that I'm sure my audience is very interested in. I think can be applied. One is you mentioned really robust change management policies. We hear this all the time. Just to have a very clear playbook plus visibility on what are you doing and why are you doing it goes a long way. Like I mentioned, even moving desks can feel daunting, so it's definitely a really great one. And I think the second piece is how you're pressure testing and iterating and using multiple sources of data to come to a conclusion is really important versus just relying on one data source. Like, badge swipes or sensors might be part of the story, but you cannot have this without actually asking your employees. So I really like it, and it is pretty much aligned with what Lisha mentioned in terms of just surveying employees and really understanding. So it's great that there are similarities in that sense. I wanted to pass a question to Henrik, which I think if you can even extrapolate this, right? Like we talked about how Brent has done basically multiple experience within the company. Can you share a little bit of success stories for companies, whether they're in a hybrid mode or flexible mode, that are able to bring people together? How do they do it, and why was it successful?
Yeah, I wish we had a couple of more hours to talk about this, and I also wish that I could speak as fast as Brent. I need to exercise my skills. But there are so many success stories out there. At the same time, as I'm saying, that they are really humble, because it is a big lift. It's a big lift of really understanding, okay, how and which direction are we going to take? And I admire companies who have that approach, like test and learn, gather data, really understand, ask things, look at reports, look at data. I think that's the best way to do it, and it looks different company by company. The worst thing is to kind of revert back to gut feeling, or even worse, nostalgia, and just say let's bring everyone back, because that works well, we think. I don't think that's credible anymore, actually. If they do, it needs to be backed up by data, and I still haven't seen one company that has convinced me in a transparent way that they are moving all of their people back to the office because of analysis and conclusions from it. So I think that says a lot. But of course, clients that I get really good insight into, an office that I've been visiting, for example, many times the last weeks, is Microsoft, because we serve Microsoft in many locations over Europe. They have a great hybrid model in play, and what they have done is that they are I would say, in a pretty people-centric strategy, listen to the organization, what works well, and what they have as well have done is that they have integrated their corporate mission into their work strategy, right? Because many of their products really fit actually their work style. They are even trying to convince others to work smarter, better, more informed with help of their product. So it's easy for them to integrate their corporate mission into their work strategy, which is also one of the things that the great companies do. Third thing that they do really good is flexible spaces and great experiences. So whenever you kind of get into a Microsoft Office, you get a great feeling of being welcomed. Maybe there is an open space, really nice design, barista service, great food and beverage solutions. And if you want to focus, you can do that. If you want to engage really well, you can do that. So they are also working really much with the actual workplace experience. And again, the tech part of a strategy for companies like Microsoft is easy to do. More difficult if you are not a tech company, of course, but other great companies, they also integrate a really great work tech strategy, finding out, okay, we need to work this and this way, but okay, given that, what kind of tools do we need to have to collaborate and communicate? And I would say number 5 that all of these great companies do is that they have figured out that sustainability is no longer an option. Everything when it comes to people movement, people's lives, family, lifestyles, corporate, everything around the office needs just to be very sustainable. But the thing is that independent of model, if it is full-time in office, hybrid, or fully flexible, everyone is investing in the workplace experience right now. It has never been more strategic. It's a board item, never been before. So during my last 20 years, this is the coolest we have been. Yeah.
And it's amazing because workplace experience, and Lisha, I saw you came off mute, but I think it's so many things, right? Like you mentioned, it's the people function, it's the strategy, it's your real estate portfolio, your workplace itself, right? And what does it actually mean? The IT piece that often is forgotten or in that discussion, but it's actually crucial, right? To have that experience. So it's really encouraging to see that. Lisha, you were about to comment as well.
I just wanted to double down on kind of what Henrik said, that I think, you know, looking at this question of like, what are successful examples of blending? And I'm very transparent with like, I don't think we have it right here at Handshake, and I don't think any company has it right now. But I think what is really exciting is we get to try, and we get to try new things. I feel really lucky in my role here that I have the full support of our leadership team, which is also our 3 co-founders. Yesterday, I chatted with our CEO, who's the co-founder, and he just has this like enthusiasm to build community, whether you're in an office here, San Francisco, in London, whether you're remote in Atlanta, and like really like building that common thread that connects us all together. And so I think it's really exciting when like leaders are supportive of that. But I think admitting that like we don't have it all figured out right now is good. And it's the exciting part of it, is being able to figure it out.
It's excellent. It's actually a great follow-up to a question that I have for you, and please, anyone on the call chime in about how to make leadership and executive management bought in on flexibility, on board with your policies. Because at the end of the day, and I heard this many times, if my CEO could have it, we would all be in the office 5 days a week. But because we don't want to be that blunt, we're slowly trying, and they're trying to really, you know, be the bridge between the founders or the exec to the actual employees. So I'm curious from your perspective, like when you work so directly and so closely with founders or leadership, how can you know, explain and make a case for flexibility and the impact on the employee experience? We had you know, a discussion of what is the actual ROI of this, and how can you help really bring this to life for leadership and have their bought in.
Well, that's a really good point, Lisa. Is like it's really hard to track the ROI on a lot of stuff we do, right? I always outline it as like the input and output of value. Like our roles are the input of value. We input value into our team, whether it's the lights and the toilets working, to the food program, to our ERG communities. Like we're inputting value that then directly correlates to the output of productivity in our teams, making the company successful. But it's really hard to track that. I look at it as a storyteller. I look at myself as a storyteller. And I think in our roles, or my role specifically, working with our executives, like each of them have like a different language. They all look for something different. They speak differently. So I think it's really like tuning into, okay, the CEO is going to look for this. The COO is looking for this. Our chief technical officer, this is what they prioritize. And really finding a way to tell the story in their language so they understand, so that we can get action to do the things that we know input value that then will output that into that productivity. So I look at it as storytelling, and I think a lot of it is really putting in the time to get to know them and really build that kind of trust relationship. But I really think it comes down to storytelling. Some of them really want to see the analytics. They want to see the numbers. They want to, you know, look at the budget. And then other ones are looking at different things. Well, what time are people coming in? Are they happy when they're here? Do we have music playing? Are they staying for lunch? So really understanding what they're looking for, I think, is really key. And then finding a way to tell the story to them.
Amazing. I'm curious, Brent, from your perspective, how do you do this as well? Reason being, one, flexibility is definitely embedded in all of these experience and experiments. So one is, what do you present to leadership in terms of, okay, this is working, this is why we're going to continue this program. And the second piece of the question is, how do you even decide on which programs are you going to experiment? And how do you plan them and their outcomes?
Oh yeah, that's a lot of questions.
I
don't
know,
know
I'm
all
trying
that,
to
but
squeeze them
I
all.
will try. But
Right.
yeah, when trying to really appeal to selling off ideas on what works and what doesn't work, it kind of leads into why we do things also in the first place too. But to Alicia's point, understanding people is the core of our success on there, of understanding what's important to each individual. So when we meet with each executive, some are going to have other importance on one thing versus another. And so really tailoring that is extremely important. I do like to make sure that we do back up everything with data. Data's, for me, as long as it's interpreted correctly, is something that is very difficult to argue with, that it's always going to be something that we can go with. As long as it's interpreted correctly. And I think that's always the difficult part on there. If we're trying to just get one source of data, people don't always understand themselves real well. Things change over time, and being able to show all of that is important for being able to show that full supportive story on there. But as we look at why we do what we do in the first place, we start to really get ideas from our employees or what we're seeing out in the industry. And so just understanding where there might be some issues right now and trying to anticipate what might actually happen in the future is really the way that we start just our very, very foundation in there. So we might have some chatter across Slack channels of people going, I'm a remote employee with no office nearby. I wish I could get near people. What can I do? And so looking at that are ways that we might start to look at different kinds of experiments.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I know it's time to transition to our breakout rooms. So we are going to now be reallocated to breakout rooms to have a more intimate discussion with our speakers, to be able to, ask any questions that you would like, or double down on the information that our great speakers have shared. So I'll let our team to distribute